Welcome to Skechcraft, the podcast for art, design, and process junkies. I'm Rob Duenas, full-time graphic designer, illustrator, and artist esquire. This is an unedited podcast, which means there will be cursing from time to time, so please be aware. That being said, here we go. Man, I gotta get Joe in here for jokes. Joe for jokes. All right. I don't think he appreciates a lot of that humor at his expense, but I do. All right. And hey, happy New Year, everybody. Welcome back to Skechcraft. Hey, this is Rob Duenas here, Rob D. So, it's a new year, and we got our first sketch rant. Really, this is more like a State of the Union for the world of Skechcraft. Today's episode is Goodbye Gamefan. Briefly want to talk to you all about my departure from Gamefan magazine. Just to sort of, if you have any questions, I get a lot of people like, oh, what's up, what's going on, what are you doing now, are you well? What's going on with that? So let's give you a little history. So in 2008, I met Dave Halverson, who is the publisher currently of Gamefan, editor-in-chief owner, and at the time had a magazine called Play Magazine. If you're not aware of that, that was an independent video game magazine. Dave's been doing them for years. He did the original Gamefan, then he did Gamers Republic, and then he did Play. And Play had already been around for about several years at the time, about 7 or 8 years, and I was deeply familiar with it, and so I went over there to work with him on a Death Junior graphic novel, leading the world of T-shirts that I was in, doing designing men's and boys apparel for mass market. And so I went over there, and then within the year they brought me on as their staff artist, a little bit of pitching from me on that concept. And for a year and a half or so, it was fun times. I was illustrating a lot of stuff on the interior, working on cover art, and getting my art abilities up. And it was interesting. I was working from home and learning how to sort of navigate those waters, and everything was great until about October of 2009. And Play just suddenly went out of business, and I got to be honest, folks. No one saw that coming. Not even Dave. The powers that be at that company just never really informed anyone of the state that they were in due to running a dead magazine, which was Geek magazine, and the advertisement dollars sort of just up and disappeared in 2009. After the whole economy thing in the fall of 2008. So it wiped out Play actually overnight. And that's actually easy to understand in that, when they go to print a magazine, you have to pay the printer immediately. They don't let you invoice for 200-something days. So, payroll and everything else sort of comes right out the door, and then you're sort of stuck with, you can't print. You can't afford to print. So I think the idea at the time was that Play would be on hiatus for a couple months, and they'd go and work out some new advertising deal, and that just fell through. And so I was left in a weird position. It was December of 2009, and I had a little bit of money in the bank because I hadn't been spending much working from home. And I said, well, I was gonna enjoy my Christmas and then definitely figure out what the game plan was in January, and if I was gonna pursue going back into T-shirts or maybe try a run at drawing comics full time. And then Dave got a hold of me in January and said, hey, he wants to relaunch Gamefan, the original Gamefan. and he wanted me to basically be the staff artist again. But if I would also, take the layouts, because the guys that were doing layouts at Play sort of had a style and a rhythm, and it was an economical style and rhythm. But to hit the look of Gamefan from the 90s was going to require someone who knew a little bit more about Photoshop and stuff like that. Enter me. So the idea was that they would create the layouts, and then I would just take those layouts and kind of go over them. And then I would go over their layouts and sort of spruce them up and add just, artistic stuff to it to give it that Gamefan feel. And I did a couple tests with that. There were some Bayonetta layouts from Play that I took, and I did the exact same thing. I said, here we go. I'm ready to go. And then the two artists, they jumped ship. Now, at the time, I was told that they just, I don't know, they gave me a reason for that. And looking back at it now, I sort of feel that, the reason why I've sort of, let me sort of stop there. So, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, anyhow, they jumped ship, and then Dave said, hey, how do you feel about, like art directing the whole magazine, like just knocking it out? And I was like, I don't know anything about laying out magazines, Dave. You know what I mean? Like fixing and, sprucing up something someone hands me in Photoshop. So one, I can do that to my heart's content. But I don't draw. I mean, where are you putting pictures there and stuff? And he was like, no, it's really easy. You just, just draw the boxes here and there, and, you add a little something. It's not that hard. And I was like, okay. So I went up there, and he kind of like showed me a little bit of InDesign. And, I went home, loaded it up, and locked myself in a room for about 3 weeks, and figured I had enough skill to get the job done. At least for a first issue. And I had planned on drawing the covers as well, but that's a whole nother thing. So that's April of 2010. So we finally came out between April and May of 2010. And that was an interesting situation because, the magazine kind of got split in half at the time. The idea was that someone who was on staff had suggested that, hey, we should do a movie side, since we were kind of doing that stuff with Geek, and we can kind of roll them into one magazine. And I guess because someone saw Mark Echo's magazine, that was a flip magazine, that they thought we would do it too. And I got to be honest, guys, I was vocal against doing a flip magazine from the beginning. That's not throwing anyone under the bus. That was just God's honest truth. And that comes from comic books. Flip books are generally never seen in a positive light in comics, because you're always getting like half the book, and you don't know which one it is you're getting, and it kind of ruins the collectability on a lot of levels. And it's one of those ideas that always looks great on like the back end, but on the retail side, it's a nightmare. And I'll tell you what's a bigger nightmare that you never think about doing flip books is sending that shit to the printer. Because the first time I had to send those files to the printer and send files that were upside down as well and rotated it took me 2 days of nonstop clicking, to get everything set up and optimized and sent out, which I didn't know anything about optimizing PDFs to send to the printer. I had done printing like at Kinko's for like 5 years, but I didn't have to do a lot of optimization because there were individual files. But to have to manually upload on the internet, 100 pages to a printer within an hour, you can't do that when they're 37 megabytes a piece. That's like 14, 16 gigs, and a printer's not going to want that. So there's all sorts of tips and tricks that I had sort of, look at, I'm really fluent in Acrobat, so like I knew, okay, I could do this, I could do that. And I had some of my old plugins from Kinko's back in the days that I managed to save. That helped me through a lot of that process. And making that issue 1 was a trip to hell and back. I actually sat in my room, living off a box of donuts for a week. And anytime I got tired, I would just eat like half a donut. And they would sit there, and about 3 or 4 days, these stale, bad donuts. It was just this punishing nightmare. And I had like 3 tracks from the Bourne Identity on like a loop, just to keep the speed up. Figuring that, okay, well, I sort of crammed a year's worth of knowledge into like a month and a half or so. And I kind of did. So then we go to issue 2, and I told Dave, hey, I need help. Making these by myself is not the way to go. And it could look a lot better, and there's things and this and that. And he said, I'll go get you help. So I started laying out the cover story for issue 2. And then, again, we ran into all the same issues we ran on issue 1. I had no help. And then the cats that were doing the movie side didn't turn in anything. And it was just just mean. It was a mean process. But on the upside, I started really playing with like rotating screens or really getting the magazine closer to what Gamefan was. And we launched that issue right before E3. So we had it at E3. And that was June of 2010. And then, so I said, hey, Dave, we may want to stop thinking about monthly magazines and maybe move this to bi-monthly. Because I think 6 issues a year is possible. If we get help, we could do 6 issues a year and Girls of Gaming and a one-shot. You know, would be good. We'd be good to go. So then we move on to issue 3. We're supposed to be E3 wrap-up. Issue 3 was the first time that the magazine sort of looked like Gamefan. I mean, it looked like Gamefan. I had a feel for how my flow out of InDesign. I was very pumped and excited. And we put more, and it was full games. We dropped the movie side finally. And put more games in there than I ever had a right to. And the paper stock was fantastic. That magazine's heavy. If you ever get a copy of issue 3, it weighs a truck. But it took a little bit longer. We actually didn't get it out till August. And part of that had to do with Dave having overload. And I think the other part is I was losing a little steam. And so then Dave was saying to me, hey, it doesn't need to be so complicated. You know, like your process doesn't need to be all consuming. You don't have to do as much. And I'm like, but it's called Gamefan. So I said, why don't we just make Play Magazine and you can go get your other guys back and we can go back to the way it used to be. You know, the people who are buying Gamefan have an expectation of Gamefan. I mean, if you're going to redesign it and it's not going to be Gamefan, then I don't think it should be called Gamefan. Let's just make up another game. Let's just call it Push My Buttons because you're fucking pissing me off. You know, let me call it Yank My Cord, motherfucker. No, but you know, so we move on to issue 4, and that was really a fun issue for me actually. That was when we were supposed to draw the cover for Enslaved, and I laid out this really unique thing, and I was sort of coming up with my own layouts, and I really enjoyed that. But I didn't get to draw the cover because Namco sent us some artwork that we used, which was fine, but I really wanted to draw it. And then we went and did Girls of Gaming 8 in between that. And no. Then we did 5, and I was supposed to draw that cover. It was going to be the Donkey Kong issue. And I was so excited for that. Gamefan doing Donkey Kong. If any of you are familiar with the history of Gamefan, for me, Gamefan, when it first premiered Donkey Kong Country, was the first issue of Gamefan I ever read. And then Donkey Kong Country Returns, or Diddy Kong, and then the kid and the girl and all that other shit, Kong games, were all Gamefan covers. And I was like, finally, I'm going to get to do a Donkey Kong cover, and I'm going to draw in color. It's going to be awesome. And with issue 5, because it shipped later and later, well, I didn't get to the printer until close to Christmas. Dave said, well, the cover story is going to be old. The game's already out. We need to put something new. So he put Little Big Planet and got the CG render from them. And it was a preview, too. It wasn't even, the game. And I was like, well, fucking, what does it matter if the game's already out? I don't fully understand why magazines have to continually show you a game that's on its way in 6 months. You know? And I've proven, the sales on Gamefan have always been good, right? We've sold, almost completely out. And our content's always been old in that it's games that are already on the shelf. Not by design, more because we kept shipping the thing late. However, there's so many fucking games that come out these days, people. So many. It's just games you miss. You know, and Donkey Kong Country Returns didn't exactly sell gangbusters, so to have that out right before Christmas on the shelves, re-promoting, is actually smarter. You know, and it would have been a fully drawn interior cover, and that didn't happen. It was a CG thing that I had to add a lot of Photoshop to try and make that somewhat artistic, and I did the logo like a sticker book and the whole thing, and did this whole sticker book layout in issue 5. And I didn't, you know, and so I told Dave, I said, you know, with issue 6, I want to draw the covers, and he's like, well, you know, we have to see if they're going to let that. I said, but it's our fucking magazine. We can do whatever we want, right? I mean, right? He's like, well, yeah, I guess we could. So I said, we were going to go do Girls of Gaming 8 in January. So I said, I want to draw one of the covers. Just let me draw fucking whatever, you know. I want to draw Enslaved because that's the cover I was supposed to draw. And so I did this Enslaved cover, and Dave was, I guess he hadn't really seen my art in a year or so, you know. So he was like, whoa, dude, you fucking, wow. You know, he was so impressed with the art that then it became a matter of all the art we were getting in from publishers was fucking horrible. I want you to draw this one. I'm like, well, I have to lay out the whole magazine too. I mean, drawing 2 covers and laying out entire magazines, I mean, that's a lot of work, Dave. And I'm still doing this all by myself. So Girls of Gaming 8 came out, and that's an interesting issue. I had tried a lot of different things. I wasn't really trying to create a look for it at that point. It was like just something to do something completely different than what had been done before, and to get like a feel. And then we made issue 6. Now issue 6 took like 8 months to come out, so we didn't actually ship issue 6 until June of 2011, and that was a hellish march through time. In that time, we had some cats come on to make a website and build a whole online presence for us that fell through, and then a buddy of mine sort of like tried to pick up those scraps, and we built the whole site and a store, and you know, and I personally uploaded 100 plus fucking articles to the website because apparently Dave and nobody else can fucking follow WordPress. So that was fun, and launched that shit, and you know, had some volunteers to start the site so we can get it going. And then we shipped issue 6. Now, issue 6 was interesting. So I told Dave, I made a mandate. So I'm going to draw both covers. I don't give a shit. And I want a retro section. Because I had started GF Retro on the site. I added this as a section thinking that, you know, Gamefan has a legacy. And its legacy is that it came out during the, you know, the 90s, which was sort of, you know, it was the end of the 8-bit and the rise of 16 and then the 32-bit age. Or Nintendo's, you know, 64-bit, whatever. But I said, you know, pixels are a big deal, and we need pixels in the magazine. These games don't look like games. And what I mean by that is in apparel, right, in clothing, in pop culture, okay? When we actually say, you know, when we're doing a shirt that says video game, we have to do the font in a pixel font and show pixel characters on some, or joysticks and buttons. Because the majority of the world, despite what hardcore gamer thinks, associate video games with pixels and Super Mario Brothers and Nintendo and shit like that. To this day. So I said, I think pixels should be in the magazine. They're on the website. We have a ton of great content. It's evergreen. As a matter of fact, I said half the magazine should be fucking pixels. That way we're really only creating, you know, half a magazine's worth of new content, and the other stuff can be done the month that there's always like 3 or 4 weeks that are like dead space. You know, where I'm like trying to do freelance or come up with a way to get, you know, to get a salary. And so I said we could fill that time with, you know, having guys go out and just write all this retro stuff. And we can do really cool retrospectives and big pixels and giant, you know, new spreads and stuff, and really make it look like old Gamefan, but with new content. And cover some of the neo-retro stuff that's coming out. And Dave was on board with that, but then it got trimmed down to like, I don't know, 8 pages. I think it was like 8 or 10 pages. And I think he was on board, but he was like, it'll be a small thing, and all this new shit gets in the mag. And this is like where he and I really started to like I like Dave personally. He's a friend of mine, and but you have to, in a business thing, sort of differentiate between friendships and business relationships. And this business relationship, in terms of vision for the magazine, from him and myself, is differs in the front end. And what I mean is I have a specific idea of what Gamefan should be. And it's what it always was in the past, modernized. I said, like, it should be high definition 1997, high definition 1994, you know? And I think Dave doesn't disagree with that until the time comes to put the stories on paper. And then it's like there's all this new content that's coming out that he gets like a kid in a candy store, and it's like, but we had to put this in, and this in, and this is coming out. And this is coming out. We had to do this over here, and this over here. And I'm like, Dave, you're creating a lot of work, man. You know, that you yourself are not going to write. I don't know who's going to write this shit, because there's only so much time to play a video game, you know. Each one takes 10 fucking hours, man, to play through. So it's like, why don't we just cut the magazine into half with retro? It's not a flip book. It's just half the magazine will be retro. And I think people would be so happy. There's so many games people never played that these kids that are growing up, they'll see this for the first time. You know, and who better to speak about that era of gaming than Dave Halverson, right? Like, we got we got you, Dave. Like, you are like, you know, the Steve Jobs of like, you know, 90s gaming, man. So like, I just don't see why it's so freaking difficult to get this concept. And he would agree with it, but then when we would go to make the magazine, it would be another story. And then I had to throw away like half the content that was generated because of this shit. And I got real fed up with it on issue 6, people. I won't lie. And if Dave, you know, you're listening, it's not personal, man. I just creatively, I can't throw away a month's worth of work. And I sort of had made a resolution that I was going to see issue 6 through and had the hand-drawn covers to prove a point that I think hand-drawn covers mean something. And and it came out, and it was a total success. The covers, man, I was really, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I was like, I really felt like I captured something that used to be done, a look, but it was a modern look. It wasn't like just a complete throwback. And we were at Comic-Con, and people flipped out over the stuff. And I was so proud of issue 6, you know, in terms of what we did there, that I wish that, you know, we sort of had the content from, the modern content from issue 4 and 5. Because the modern stuff, I don't know, some stuff really got dropped the ball on some people's sides on that issue in the front end. And I really wish the modern content was on par with issues 4 and 5. But that being said, it was still a great issue, and I was able to put in Skechcraft in the magazine, and I was really, really proud of issue 6. However, and I'm gonna move to part 2. So I'm already at the 20-minute mark. So I'm gonna leave with this, and we can move to part 2 on this. So, however, things were not all well, and after coming back from Comic-Con in 2011, being majorly sick and having to still push out that magazine, you know, I came to a crossroads, and I was pretty certain that I was done at that point. So let me explain to you the remainder of the story. So on the next exciting conclusion to Goodbye Gamefan, Sketch Rants 14. All right, thanks, bye.